The modern attack surface is vast and permeable, extending from the data center to the cloud and device edge. Security teams are stretched thinner and thinner as they try to cover this ground. The result? More high-profile breaches hit the news every day. Don't let your organization be next. ExtraHop delivers security from the inside out, helping enterprise security teams detect threats up to 95% faster and cut staff time to resolve by 2/3 or more. Act with confidence. Learn more at extrahop.com/securityweekly. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Keep your company and products relevant, competitive, and reliable by standardizing your security framework to protect intellectual property, become a reliable business partner, and guard financial and customer information. Standards Connect is an online standards management solution from ANSI. It's Standards Access Simplified. Standards Connect is a cost-saving, fully customizable solution for entrepreneurs and companies that spend $2,000 or more per year on standards and want to translate spend into a subscription model, want to simplify access, search, monitoring, and collaboration, or need a centralized hub of standards for multiple users at one or more locations. Get a free trial at securityweekly.com/ANSI. That's /ANSI.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian. Security Weekly is returning to Vegas this August for Black Hat and DEF CON. If you would like to request a briefing or sponsor an interview on site at Black Hat, please go to securityweekly.com/booking and submit your requests. We only have 4 sponsored micro interviews left and some slots for Paul's Security Weekly, which we will be recording live from Black Hat this year. Also, register for our upcoming webcast with ISC Squared by going to securityweekly.com/webcast. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them in our on-demand library at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, let's get to our guest interview. Ajit Sancheti is CEO and co-founder of Preempt and has over 20 years experience in IT security and executive leadership. Previously, he co-founded Mu Dynamics, acquired by Spirit Communications, and held various management roles. Before Mu Dynamics, Ajit was part of the corporate development group at Juniper Networks and an integral member of the team that developed the industry's first intrusion detection and prevention system at OneSecure, which was acquired by NetScreen. Prior to OneSecure, he spent 7 years at Western Digital, holding various engineering and management positions. Ajit, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me, Matt. Good day.
So I love your background a little bit because one of the things I did in my early career was IDS IPS. I spent a lot of time with Tipping Point in the early days of the intrusion prevention market down in Austin. It was just a very interesting time to see those technologies evolve. You've got a lot of experience there with the OneSecure side. So I love that part of your background because it hits home for me. I haven't done that in a long time.
Well, wasn't that an interesting time when we were trying to convince people that you can actually do real-time detection of threats on the wire? It took a long time to convince people that we could overcome false positives, we could build solutions that would work. It was a multi-year transition.
Agreed. And we probably have some of those same challenges in other areas, including some of the stuff I think you're doing now at Preempt with identity. So I'd like to start with, some of the challenges in the identity space. We definitely know identity is one of these evolving areas from the security space. I'm a big believer this is one of the 3 core capabilities we'll need in the future. So let's start with some of the problems around current identity solutions.
Yeah, so identity until now was considered to be an access management feature or capability in organizations. It was in the IT organizations, not really in security. But if you notice that as enterprises move from static networks to more dynamic, more cloud, hybrid, on-prem applications, and then you have users that are internal and external, what happens is identity is probably the one unit of measure or control that is now effective for enterprises. If you do it right, you can do security well. And that's how we are seeing identity become part of the security fabric, which means you're going to see more and more security teams either running identity and access management or being so integral to identity and access management that you will have people in both teams on both sides of the fence, both sides of the organization, both in IT and in security. And I think that over time, identity is going to become, like you said, one of the three key pillars, but also it's going to have things that are a lot easier for enterprises to do in this very dynamic world of enterprises where there's no network perimeter anymore.
Ajit, that's really interesting. And I never thought of it this way. And the more I think of it, the more that model kind of really works in that if you're not maintaining the integrity of your user's identity, kind of like all bets are off when it comes to security, right? I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I see. That's really the key. But identity by itself is very static. Who you are you a privileged user? Is it a service account? Are you a contractor? All of that's very static. What you're going to have to do with that is to add the dynamic components. What are you doing? What's normal for you? What's normal for you? People like you in the organization. What's normal for organizations like you? You have to combine identity with behavior to really understand what people are doing.
Well, that's interesting when we think about people, right? What defines them is largely their behavior, right? It's the same thing when it's their digital identity, right?
Correct. And when you start to do good modeling and you figure out exactly what parameters you want to model in your to figure out what's normal and what's not normal, you can actually get very actionable in how you can figure out when someone's real or not. Verifying in real time can make your network secure because if, as we all know, and I think Verizon, the data breach report says it, almost 4 out of 5 breaches have some form of credential compromise, which is accounts, which is users. And you know what's right and what's wrong, you can actually get ahead of a lot of breaches.
Yeah, and it's not, the variations on that are someone else has taken over that identity and is exhibiting different behaviors. And recently when I've talked to, obviously a lot of different people every week, we seem to come back to that theme when it comes down to detection. Some of the smartest people in, offense and red teams have been on the show. And really what defense comes down to is noticing those subtle changes in behavior of a user identity.
Yes. And so when we started Preempt a few years ago, we said that one of the things we had to do, and this is what they're trying to get to, which is everybody started talking about doing machine learning and taking as many data sources as possible to build great machine learning models. But what we found is the more data sources you use, the more noise there is and lesser fidelity in the data. So to understand these nuances or these slight differences that you're talking about, what you have to do is to say, I want a few data sources, but I want to really understand what is going on and get higher fidelity in the information. And if you do that, then you can actually figure out what's not good, what's right, what's suspicious, what's not malicious, what's suspicious, not malicious. And it was 2 years ago, that was something that we couldn't convince a lot of people. But now when you talk to CISOs, the first thing they ask is, what are you doing? What are you doing with machine learning? How are you using it? It's no longer, are you taking 150 data sources? It's what are you doing with the data you're taking?
Well, I mean, it's that fundamental that I think I learned when I was around 7 or 8 years old when I first learned programming, and that was garbage in and garbage out, right? And it was very simple, back then when I was first learning. But you apply that to a machine learning, data influences that machine learning, and I don't think we realize how much of a negative impact that garbage data can have to machine learning. And if it's always changing, you've got different garbage data coming in all the time, it can render your machine learning essentially useless.
Yeah, and you see that, and I'll give you one example without disparaging like the industry itself. But when we started doing user behavior analytics a few years ago, it became so difficult to understand exactly which alerts to follow up on, which ones not to follow up on, because there were so many alerts coming out, even though the machine learning models were pretty sophisticated. And so our understanding and the way we look at the market is you have to go down to a few data sources, but you have to do a lot more with them. And if you do that, then it gives you the next advantage, which is you can take action. And that is the key, is not just detecting what's going on, but how do I react to it? What can I do?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So now the big question is, right, which data sources, right? The audience is hanging on the edge of their seat now.
Yeah, so things like authentications, are you looking at the Kerberos, the LDAP, the NTLM? Are you looking at what they're doing in single sign-on platforms like Okta and in Azure AD through ADFS, Ping? You start to look at all the authentication requests. You start to understand. You take metadata like what devices are they coming from? Are the devices owned by the enterprise? What is their password strength? What are they doing? How are they doing it? You can start to get to a few data sources. Authentication requests are one. Understanding the organizational structure, getting that kind of information. We take some of these data sources. We get it from Active Directory. We get it from the Okta, Ping. We take a few other data sources, but what we decided to do was to combine traffic, because you want to understand the authentications, with logs, because you want to know whether the user is coming through a VPN. You want to know whether the user is coming from an external source. So you can't always use traffic, but if you do a combination of traffic and logs, then you start to build a very actionable model. Also, one key to it is, and I didn't talk about how the product works, but once you have the model, understanding behavior, understanding users, understanding risk, then you can take actions. And if you're sitting on the network and you're intercepting these authentications, then you can take any kind of action that ties to the kind of risky behavior that you see.
And not just block in that capacity, right? Because I understand how your technology works from our last couple of meetings, right? But you can change that on the fly, right? You don't have to necessarily say, oh, this user can't log in anymore, and that's the only action we can take, right?
Yeah, no, this is a very good point, which is that when you're inside the enterprise, when you're looking at employees on the enterprise, you're building a model, you're seeing behavior that's suspicious, but it's, like I said, it may not be malicious. You have a new project, you're accessing a new application, you're coming from a new device. I can't just block it. And that was what happened in the past. You had the two extremes, allow and deny. What you need to do is you need to give a grayscale. It's allow and deny at the extremes, multi-factor, re-authenticate, isolate, SMS, text. You have all of these responses, and based on the kind of threat that you see, you respond. Now, one thing you have to do is you have to tie the identity, behavior, and risk on the one side and the responses on the other with a very granular policy. Because every enterprise is different, every vertical is different, every enterprise policy is different. So the policy engine will allow you to say things like, if a privileged user accesses a new application, that's the identity and it's a new application, you can force a multi-factor with Duo, Okta, you take your pick, RSA, it doesn't really matter. Or you can say, if a service account behaves interactively, you may allow it, you may deny it, you may have someone else authorize it. So that policy engine that ties the detection with the response is what will make enterprises of any size feel comfortable using this kind of solution.
Yeah, but so, when I think about the data sources, right, I get the directories, I get the pings and the Oktas. How much does multi-factor and privileged access solutions matter or don't matter in your data contextualization models versus leveraging them more for maybe your auto response and resolution stuff?
Yeah, so think of it this way. When you think about machine learning models, you talk about supervised and unsupervised models. So in a supervised learning model, you have to find ways to give input into your machine learning. So typically what happens is the SOC analyst looks and says, well, this looks like a false positive. This looks like something that we need to follow up on. But that's a person that's not tied to the actual activity. Now, if you use multi-factor authentication to verify someone's transaction, that user is giving you an input that goes into your machine learning. So very quickly, those MFA verifications that they do go into your machine learning, and the product and the models become extremely quiet. So there's two benefits. One, you're verifying that the person is who they say they are. But second, the information is coming back into your model to say this is normal for this person. So let's say it happens 3 times over a week. Then the model itself now knows that this is normal for this user. We're not going to challenge them again. And that's really the benefit of tying the responses back into understanding what's normal and what's not normal.
Got it. So
That's
if you see a
question, no one asked me that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I would imagine that if you see a user constantly authenticating with a multi-factor token, over time, you probably trust that person a little more, and it changes the model. And I think a big challenge is people trying to figure out how these machine learning models actually work and what data is and isn't relevant in the model when you build it. And I think that was a great clarification, because now you know that that's normal behavior. So if you see something different, now you can trigger something else to happen. Maybe it is a reauthorization or something like that if you see something malicious out of that behavior. And that's what a human can't easily do with all the different data sources they're looking at.
Yeah, no, you bring up an interesting point in the how it matters to insider threat. So yes, I verified my identity, but what if I'm going rogue?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So what we have to be able to do is not only verify that identity and that user's access to that application or that service, but also we have to understand that what else is normal for people like them? What is normal for people like them in the organization? So even though you verified your identity and you got access, we may still have to generate an alert because this is not okay for this person or people like them. So you have to be careful that you don't just say because people verify their identity, they're okay. You still have to be careful, and you still have to run models that will tell you whether this person is going rogue.
Yeah, and that's most of the time we've done that stuff manually in the past, right? Like if I've been in these situations, you've got developers, right, and you're looking at their behaviors and logs and authentication, and one developer's like logging into a server that has, financial information on it back before cloud, right? It was a local server, and you're like, that's not supposed to happen for that group of people. But now in today's technology, we can automate that and be aware of those alerts on an automated basis.
Yeah, no, the DevOps in the new DevOps world, one of the first things you're going to see is the DevOps, because they want to do things quickly and efficiently, they will start using privileged credentials and putting them into scripts,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when they start doing that, this is a big risk for you because now that credentials being used in an automated fashion, that's really a service account.
Yeah,
it's becoming a service account with privileges. So that's one of the very interesting use cases for us is we see customers using it to figure out when someone's taking a machine account and using it interactively, which is another chance that that you've been breached,
mm-hmm.
or when a regular account is suddenly showing up as looks like a programmatic account.
Mm.
So in this world, as we all know, right, 9 out of 10 times, it's not malicious behavior. It's just people doing what they want to do to get their job done.
Right. Trying to make stuff work, which in DevOps, there's so many different types of new technology and so many different tools. I feel like it has the potential to fix a lot of security problems, but introduce a lot of newer type issues because it's so complex. You're just like, yeah, just use this high privilege account so we don't have to we'll deal with that later, right?
Yeah. And that leads to the next problem, which is more and more alerts for the security operations team.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to lead to more alerts, one of the things that as vendors never tell customers is, you're never going to have enough people for all the tools we give you.
Mm-hmm.
The average enterprise has over 75 security tools. So what we have to do is to figure out ways to automate a lot of this, at least get a lot of these alerts that need to be just easily dispositioned and auto-resolved. The system and the tools have to do it. We are seeing some customers claim that they are seeing about a 30 to 40% reduction in the incidents. And, of course, the information that helps them resolve the incidents that they manually look at. And that's going to be key because you're never going to have enough people to look at every incident. And you're going to have to make judgment calls. So if you can automate that process, you're going to be better off.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, you open by talking about how identity shifting from IT to security. It's actually also shifting to the development teams, to your example on DevOps, right? And so security teams' visibility into what development's doing in DevOps is tough right now, I think, because they might have the corporate identities, but all these service accounts that are being done on the DevOps side and rolled out to support all these new applications, there's a blind spot for the security teams because development's managing a lot of that directly.
Well, because infrastructure is code.
Yes. Yes. The way I think about it is a security product has three phases to it. There's initial value, there's critical value, and there's continuous value. The initial value is the visibility you get when you deploy. We didn't give it enough importance, but we're finding more and more customers are using it from that perspective, just to know what's going on, who's doing what, what's stale, which accounts are not being used, which accounts are being misused. That kind of that kind of visibility is the initial value. The critical value is when you've been breached or you have an incident. A lot of security products do that. The challenge is, how do I give continued value to a customer? And many security products fail in that aspect of it. And you have to be able to give continuous value, and which is what we mean by, okay, this user did something unusual, let's verify it. Or this account is being misused. Let's authorize it, allow it, or have someone make an exception. And that continuous value, if you can provide that to your customers, you're going to give them a lot of benefit that they didn't initially think they would use it for. Any good security product, you have to make sure the customers get continuous and daily value from it. Otherwise, when you go back to them and say at the end of the year, hey, I want to talk about a renewal, the first thing they're going to say, the CFO is going to say is, well, do we have a breach? Was this useful? And you don't want to be in that place.
Yeah, I wish more security vendors would take that to heart, because this is one of the things I tried to push at a few of my previous employers. Actionability, the ability to do that action step, whatever it is providing way more value for the long haul for the customer than just giving them a bunch of data, sending them a report and go, yeah, you figure it out, right? And so we've seen products like yours shift to really bring that action component into the value proposition and really be able to provide, I think, tremendous value for your customers. Not everybody's there, and I wish more would do it.
Yeah, the challenge is that nobody wants to be fired, right? You stop the CEO from getting access to an application, and the first thing either they're going to say is take that product out of the network or you're fired. So you have to find ways, and that's why the policy engine works really well. And with having this grayscale of responses, you can decide how you want to respond to a threat. It's not always block. It's not always deny. It can be verify. It can be have it authorized by someone else. Once you have those knobs, multi-factor authentication has become so popular in the last few years. It's a great way to verify a lot of things that you couldn't do in the past. So the time is right, and more and more products will start to do it. If you're a detection-only product, it's a transitional solution in my mind. In the next few years, you're not going to get any detection-only solutions. They just don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I was at some of the same companies as Matt, pushing the same things, right?
Yeah, but 2 to 3 years ago, we were talking to a leading analyst firm, and we mentioned that this is how we're going to solve this problem. And what they told us was the solution, the enforcement is only going to be at the endpoint. No one's going to be brave enough to do enforcement of the network layer because there's too many people will be affected by it. And so, we had to still pursue what we thought was the right way to do it. And now, Microsoft says conditional authentication, part of Azure AD, it's a big part of Azure AD. Then you have, you pick your form of adaptive authentication, step-up authentication. People are realizing more and more that doing it only at the endpoint is not possible because so many people are bringing their own devices. BYOD takes that away from you. So you have to bring it to the network. And as you do that, the world of enforcement technology, the world of enforcement mechanisms is going to increase. And that's really what's going to drive these solutions.
Yeah. The perimeter is the identity. I always say it's a combination of the identity and the application. Some people say it's just identity. But to your point, right, that edge now is way out at the identity frontier. And if you don't control the endpoint, it's going to be very hard for you to put some of these action resolution steps in place.
Yeah, and you said something interesting, which is the application has a role. The application absolutely has a role because there may be applications that are risky, applications that you're very sensitive, that you care about more. Because every time if you want to verify someone accessing an application, or for some reason you need to challenge them, you get MFA fatigue, right? And someone said to me, it's multi-fatigue authentication, multiple fatigue authentication, because you're forcing them to verify, and it becomes friction in the process of doing your job. So the way you build these policies, the way you enforce them, you have to start to say, how do I build it so that my users we can maintain security, but not cause the users to have to go through this every time. And so the policy engines are going to have to use risk as another parameter or another dimension when trying to figure out what to verify in real time, what to check, what to know, what to track, what to audit, things like that.
And risk requires business context. And if you don't understand the criticality of the application they're logging into, how can I build an effective risk profile?
Yes, and that brings me to the thing that people are now talking about, which is zero trust, right? Everybody's talking about building zero trust solutions. That reminds me of data lakes from 2 years ago. We thought it solved every problem, but most organizations found out they didn't have the resource to do it right. So what you have to figure out is, how do I build build my network, my infrastructure to do what I need to do for my sensitive applications and not have to rechange and re-architect my entire network because someone told me that zero trust is the way to go. And I think we're going to go through the same trough of disappointment or disillusionment soon, because not everybody is Google, and Google had the resources to do it. And so you're going to have to find ways to get to continuous authentication or adaptive authentication before saying everything's going to be zero trust. That's going to be very hard.
Yeah, good point. Ajit, one quick question. You have released a free version of Preempt Lite. Can you just give us a quick overview of what that product will do for people who use it?
Yeah. So as I said, when we go to enterprises, the first thing they're really surprised by is the visibility that they get. And so just by taking our central management system and we scrape some data in from the network, we can start to tell you, who your users are, which ones are privileged by delegation. We can do analytics on your group policy objects. We can start to see who has weak passwords, which passwords showed up in breaches. Just those insights into your network are super valuable. And it made us uncomfortable to give all of that away, but we felt that that's a great way for enterprises to say, okay, this is the product that brings us value, so they can talk to us about doing the policy-based enforcement. And so Preempt Lite is something that we launched just not even 2 months ago. We haven't even publicly gone out and said much about it, but we have over 100 enterprises that have deployed it, from 100 users to 100,000 users. Wow. It's surprised us quite a bit.
That's great. Visibility is the first step in the process. Yeah. And I think it's great when people can provide that visibility and show the value of what else you can do with your platform. And I think that's great. Paul, any additional questions for Ajit while we have him here?
No, I'm good. I thought that was really awesome, by the way.
Awesome. Ajit, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Right, sorry, Ajit, did you have one more comment before we close out this?
No, I just want to say thank you to both Matt and Paul, both of you. Yeah, you're great hosts.
Thank you so much. Awesome.
If anyone wants to learn more about Preempt or sign up for their free version of Preempt Lite, please visit securityweekly.com/Preempt. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.